Hello, welcome to my show, my other show. My name is Susan Rushton and this is Muse. It's the show on which I'm privileged to, I'm honored to, I'm allowed to talk to people who have been visited by the Muse, who have sought the Muse, who are involved in arts. And this every year I choose to talk about writing because I love to talk about writing, and I don't get enough of a chance to, in particular my own writing as well as others. So once a year I gather a couple of writers to join me and talk about writing. And the writers I've asked to join me today are Patricia Caspers. Thank you, Tricia.
Thanks for having me.
And you're welcome, my pleasure. And Tricia can be reached at pcaspers@westtresselreview.com. And the other writer who follows the Muse is John Bowman. And you've seen both of these authors and me in the Auburn Journal for years. And John's email is john.bowman58@gmail.com. Well, welcome both of you.
Thank you.
It's a kick to have you with me. And the way we work this is that I've got a bunch of questions, and we're all going to answer them, which includes me, and I just love that. So the first question always is, what do you write? So I write, in particular, I write an opinion column for the Auburn Journal. I've been doing that since 1986 or 7, some horrendous number like that. And this is my book that I self-published a few years ago. It is called Reflections from My Small Town by Susan Rushton. Look how big Susan Rushton is. And this is available at mootpointpress.com if you're interested in buying this. It doesn't delete you. It directs you to Amazon, but you can go look at my mootpointpress.com. That's what I write all the time. I also I've written a fantasy for young adults, and I started it before Harry Potter was published. And Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling just threw her characters into the situation and and forced them to deal with it. And I provided all sorts of extremely explicit instructions to my characters, which took up time and made it and prevented the action from happening. So I have to, after all these years, I have to rewrite it. Another thing I want to do that I've been threatening for years to do is write about the characters in Hollywood comedies from 1930 to 1950, Hollywood movies. And I keep threatening to do that and not doing it. Okay, Tricia, what do you write?
Well, I write a column for the Auburn Journal. It's in every Sunday, called Homecoming. I also write poetry, and my book, In the Belly of Albatross, was published by Glass Lyre Press. Glass Lyre,
L-Y-R-E?
Yes.
I love that. But being a writer, I would.
And it's available at Winston Smith Books.
Cool.
Yes. And I write nonfiction essays that sort of get published randomly. And I also am writing a middle grade novel called The Canary Girls. And it's about two 12-year-old girls growing up in Auburn in the 1980s. And they're neighbors. And one of the girls suspects that the other girls grandmother is Amelia Earhart. And so it's sort of that
Ooh.
figuring
Nice.
out
Oh, I want to read
whether
that,
or not
Tricia.
she's Amelia Earhart. Well, I'll have to finish it.
Wow. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. John, what do you write?
I write a lot of poetry, and I write fiction. And this is my book that was published by Finishing Line Press. It's a poetry book called This Could Be the House I Die In, which is the lead poem, or the cover poem. I also write short stories. I write a column occasionally for the Auburn Journal, about once a month.
Okay.
And I have written 2 novels, both non-published. I haven't gotten anybody to get interested enough to publish them. The one I really like, I'm going to keep trying to get it published, is called The President's Dream Worker. And it's about a dream worker who advises the President of the United States, who happens to be the first Native American President of the United States. And when it's discovered that he works with the dream worker, it gets him into a lot of hot water.
Yeah. Like Nancy Reagan's astrologer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but even worse.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I allude to that in this novel. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
Interesting.
Wow. Okay. Tricia, you get to hold the box and don't look.
Oh,
Don't look.
okay. I won't look. Let's see. What do you look for in others' writing? So you'll take that. Okay. So I think that I look for authentic characters, complex characters, and in fiction, and also I look for stories that bring up current day issues. In fact, I just read a really great YA novel called The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon, and it's kind of it's meant for teenagers, so it's not a really deep novel, but it also addresses some really interesting topics about immigration and being first generation, residents of the United States, and cultures kind of colliding, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think, I love a deep, juicy story that really gets into the characters, and then in poetry, I think I just look for poems that have I love a great metaphor, and and also I love a poem that makes me feel, that breaks my heart. I love a poem that breaks my heart.
And a poem breaking your heart can be a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. John.
Well, when you said you like poetry that are a good example of metaphor, it reminds me of a poem of yours that's in that book
Oh yeah.
about the welder.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that is, you could do a class on metaphor based on that poem. But what I look for is originality, both in poetry and in fiction. I'm reading a book right now, and I've read a lot of books this summer, more than usual. But I'm reading a book called Americana with an H on the end by Chimamanda, I can't pronounce her last name, but it's something like Adichie, Adicche. She's a Nigerian woman who, she's a Nigerian American because she lives here now, but it's about a Nigerian's experience going between 2 continents. It's beautifully written. I just can't get over it. So well written that sometimes I'm kind of a slow reader, and there have been sentences in that book that I've read like 5 times thinking, how did she do that?
You reading them 5 times with pleasure, not
With
because
pleasure,
you don't
with-
understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and wanting to read it aloud to somebody. Usually it's Val, or my dog. And in poetry, same thing. I really like originality. I like to be surprised. And,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I demand to be to float. I demand to forget that I'm reading. I want so badly to just sail, to float on these beautiful words, this beautiful story, this well-written thing that I'm not aware that I'm reading. I want to be there and not read about it. I want to be there. Mm-hmm. And that's what I demand. I want not to trip on anything. Mm-hmm. And as writers, we are struggling with this because we know what makes good writing, mm-hmm. writing that we can skate on. At the same time, John, you're caught by this beautiful sentence. Oh my God, how did she do that? Oh, how beautiful. And you're stopped. And my problem with wonderful writing is that I'm just leaping past and oh wow, this is wonderful. But then I have to stop down, slow down. But there are other things that I get so mad about that I can't, that's badly written. I won't finish it. So I haven't finished a book in many years. Okay, John, you get to pick a question and not look at it, and then now you get to look at it.
Ooh, what's the hardest part about writing?
Okay.
Should I start?
Yes, you get to start.
Getting started. Yes, making time, because there always is time, but making time. I'm involved in a lot of things, even though I'm supposedly retired. Yeah, just getting started and being with it. And also, one thing that's hard for me in fiction is not beating a reader over the head with something. I mean, I'm a very linear and literal person, and I had a career in journalism, so I tend to write like a journalist. But
by which you mean dryly.
Yeah, I'm afraid so, yes.
Not emotionally.
Not emotionally, exactly. And so I was just reading, I wanted to talk about a book where I've learned a lot from a woman by name...
This is what happens with writers. They have books.
Sands Hall wrote this book, and she talks about, in setting scene, how you have to show, you know, the old adage, show, don't tell, but you have to really prepare yourself. You have to look at the scene you're going to write, and don't write it, don't compose it. Think about what you're trying to accomplish with it. Well, that's hard for me to do. I just want to get going and get writing, and so sometimes after I'm done with it, I realize I haven't allowed the reader to figure things out. Mm-hmm. I've told them too much. So that's one of the hard things.
Okay. Trish, what is the hardest part about writing for you?
Well, I definitely agree
Tricia,
with
excuse me.
It's okay. Just, getting the butt in the chair. That's probably the hardest part. And then second to that is probably for me, going from poetry to fiction, I tend to want to show every tiny detail. I want to have them unfolding the paper, and it's like origami, and the trees are glistening, and they're like little hummingbirds, and that sort of thing. And especially with middle grade fiction, I need to just cut that out and get to the point and get to the action. Yeah. So that is definitely where I struggle. Yeah. I have to go back through, okay, I don't need that, I need, which I think is easier than having nothing to say, and having to go and add more. So I'm telling myself it's a good problem to have.
Okay, yeah, all right. The hardest part about writing for me is mechanical. And that's moving smoothly from one paragraph to the next. Mm-hmm. And that's what stops me. Because I don't want something like the second thing that is most difficult about that's just, for one thing, it's too many words and it's just dreary. But I have to make it smooth so that the reader can step from the last sentence of the previous paragraph to the first sentence of the next paragraph, and it's hard sometimes, very hard.
Yep, I have to go back and cut out all my and thens.
Yeah.
And then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And rephrase it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So, why do you think good writing is important? I think good writing is important because it shows careful thought. Photographers have it easy, quote. Photographers have it easy because here's the subject, and we don't have to think about it. We know it's water and rocks and beautiful trees. We know it, but for those if we were to describe this, that we see it, we know what it is. And we want to make it clear and beautiful without being tedious about it. Mm-hmm. And that's also the hardest part about good writing. but good writing is important because it's our language, and we need to do it right. We need to be clear. And we don't, especially if we're trying to convince someone or to change someone's mind, perhaps, we have to do it clearly and dryly, not emotionally, because emotion can get in the way. Okay.
So why do you think good writing is important? I think good writing is important because it takes us out of our little bubbles that we live in, and it puts us in other people's lives and other countries and other experiences that we would never have, and we would never understand where someone else is coming from if we didn't have that book to get inside of it and to forget who we are and to be that person and to live somewhere else and feel empathy. I think, that's why it's important.
Well, I agree with both of you, and I also think that it's important because it can change the world. I think when I think
me too.
When I think of some of the speeches like the Gettysburg Address or JFK's inauguration speech, what great impact that those messages had on the world, and they were written before they were spoken. And those were examples of good writing. So I think that's one of the reasons
I have a
it's
dream.
important.
Yeah.
I have a dream. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And those are my eyes. And what's the best part of writing? Well, the best part of, I have to start with when I'm interviewing somebody. I think the best part of the interview is when you're with someone and you can't quite get them to open up. You can't quite, you just feel like you're kind of struggling to make it interesting. And then you say something and it turns. And the whole conversation just goes to another level, and it ends up being a deeper, richer interview, and then a deeper, richer story. I love that moment. And also, I love, getting in the chair and sitting down and writing is so hard. But I love the part where I get to the meat of it, and I know what I want to say, and I know where I'm going, and I know where I've been, and I'm just, and it's kind of like being in that hypnotic state where you're just flowing with the text, and you're not even in the room anymore.
Yes.
That's my favorite part.
Well, you mentioned the Muse at the start of this program, and there are times when I write. I love this part. Where, particularly with poetry, it happens. I think, where did that come from? And I feel so good about it. But My partner Val says that she can always tell when we have this little office that I'll go into, and it's sort of my little man cave, and I'll write sometimes when it's not too hot because we don't have any AC in there.
Oh, geez.
But anyway, I'll come out of there, and she said I can tell when you've been writing and not working on the budget or something else because there's such a glow about you. And it is very nurturing and nutritious to me to write. Yeah.
Yeah. The best part about writing. I wrote a piece once where I was so mad, so angry that I don't remember writing it.
Wow.
And boom, there it came.
Whoa.
There it was. Oh my. I'm convinced that a piece of, not really convinced, but I have this imagination that says that the piece is already written. I just have to find it. And when I do, I'm the one finding my own writing. I understand that, but there it is. And when I'm proud of it, I love that. When I'm not proud of it, I have to make it right better and change the words and change the order and arrange, and that's fun too. But the best part is seeing good stuff on the page. Stuff I'm proud of. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what we have here. Boy, this is big. What's the best piece of advice you've received about writing? Wow. There are two parts to this. One, in poetry, the best advice I ever received I got from Kim Adonisio. You're familiar with Kim Adonisio, who's a wonderful San Francisco poet and fiction writer. And I took several classes and workshops with her. And at one point she said, "John, you have 2 or 3 different stories in this poem. Make it. You have a tendency.
Choose one.
Yeah, she said you
have
have a tendency to do that. She said choose one, and that made a lot of difference for me. It was hard for me to do, but I got what she said. To really choose one and stay focused. So, on poetry, that was the best piece of advice. On writing,
Excuse me. That's also a great piece of advice for fiction.
I imagine.
For nonfiction, it's a great piece of advice. Choose the story. Choose what you're going to tell.
Yeah.
And tell that one, because that's all the reader is interested in. One at a time. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, and in fiction, I've had so many good pieces of advice, but one didn't come to me, but I read about it. Ezra Pound told Hemingway, "Go in fear of abstraction." And Hemingway obviously took that advice because, those pithy,
Yes.
there's
Yes.
nothing abstract about it.
Good. Yes, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you answered that question?
No,
you haven't.
no. So my poetry professor in college, I think he was quoting Retka, and he said, "A good poet knows when to cut a bad line, and a great poet knows when to cut a good line."
Ooh, wow.
Yeah.
Kill
Say that
your
again.
darlings.
Say that
Yes.
again.
Say that again.
What was it?
A good
Okay.
poet knows when to cut a bad line.
Uh-huh.
A great poet knows when to cut a good line.
Wow.
So I have a collection of good lines that just didn't work in that poem.
And you wanted them so badly too.
Yes.
You were so proud of them. Oh, look at that! Look at that! Isn't that gorgeous? But it doesn't fit.
Right.
And that's what makes a great writer, is to be able to kill your darlings.
Yes.
Yes.
And then the other great advice, people always say, write what you know, write what you know. And somebody, I think I read it on Twitter, somebody said, write what you want to know. And I thought that was, especially for a journalist, that's great advice.
Okay. What the best piece of advice I have? What changed my writing was a piece of work that I got back as an adult after years of writing. I was so proud of it. I was convinced it was beautiful. It was circled all red, 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 red. Passive verbs. Was, am, is, are, was, were, being, to be. And I was so convinced that it was beautiful writing, and it could have been so much better if I'd chosen active verbs, which require fewer words, and so you get to the point faster. That's vital, and I speak as a former smoker or recovering alcoholic, that I'm a fanatic about getting rid of forms of to be. The other great piece of advice I read in various places, but Stephen King, in his On Writing, says that he throws his characters into a situation and watches them. He doesn't know what they're going to do, and so he lets them decide. And so that's hard. Because, and I started a piece where these people were behaving in this. I didn't know where it was going to go, but it's fascinating, and the clarity became clear as I was writing. The problem became clear. Okay, I knew when we were starting this, when we began, that we would not get finished. Writers can talk about writing for hours, and you and I could do this for a long time, and with pleasure and delight, and we could keep going forever. So, but I have to stop. So this has been John Bowman, john.bowman58@gmail.com, and Tricia Caspers, Caspers at westtresselreview.com, and me at mootpointpress.com. We're authors, we're writers, we delight in a good word, in a beautiful sentence, and several to put together. Thank you very much for joining me. This has been a real kick.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you for watching, and I will see you soon.